When it comes to snake bites, India is the country that sees the most cases on an annual basis at 81,000 per year. Now, unfortunately, 11,000 of these cases, they do result in death, and typically this happens when people are maybe out in the bush because this does happen a lot in rural regions of India. They might be out in the bush, they might step on a snake, and maybe the snake will turn around, react defensively, and give them a bite on the ankle. However, there are certain cases, which are much rarer, where people have used snakes as murder weapons. Now, this case, it actually happened at the end of last year in India. It made national headlines, and it was more specifically in October when a 23-year-old woman named Basanti Patra and her 2-year-old daughter Smita were mysteriously found dead in their bedroom. So on the night of October 6, 2023, Basanti and her 2-year-old daughter Smita, they had been preparing for bed in their modest home in Odisha's Ganjam district. To be more specific, it was a place called Kabi Surya Nagar. However, little did they know that this would be the last night of their lives. So the very next morning, which was October 7th, Ganesh went on to alert all his neighbors. He was very distraught, and he was saying that how a cobra entered his house and somehow managed to bite his daughter and his wife while they were sleeping. So multiple villagers rushed over to the house after this, and they ended up finding a lifeless Basanti and Smita just laying there on their bed. So the mother and daughter, they were immediately rushed to the hospital, and unfortunately they were declared dead upon arrival. Now, what happened was in the following days an investigation was conducted in order to identify and confirm the cause of death, which according to Ganesh's report was a snake bite. So not long after this, the post-mortem was released, and authorities ended up classifying the death as an unnatural death via cobra envenomation. Now, Ganesh at this time, he was loving all the attention that he was getting, and he was garnering sympathies from his neighbors and from all his friends and family. Basanti's devastated father, Kali Patra, he was not really buying that this was an accident, and he actually started getting super suspicious. Because as days went by and his emotions stabilized from having lost his daughter, he started thinking back at the couple's situation, which I'm about to get into. He's like, there's no way that this was an accident. This had to have been a murder, and Ganesh must be the culprit. Now, Kali, the father, he had really strong reasoning for this, and it was mainly because Ganesh and Basanti, who'd gotten married in 2020, they were not long into the start of their new lives together. They just had their daughter actually in 2020 as well, the same year they got married. And just months into their marriage, they started having problems. They started fighting a lot, and it was really Ganesh that seemed to be the culprit most of the time, according to reports. It seemed like he was very abusive towards her. See, Ganesh had been working for a construction company in Himachal Pradesh, and he had just come home for a vacation about 4 months prior to this incident. Now, instead of going back to work, he ended up staying with his wife and child, and during this time, he ended up fighting a lot and quarreling a lot with her. He started harassing her for money, and because of this, Basanti actually ended up filing a complaint with the police against him under the country's Dowry Prohibition Act. In case you don't know what dowry is, I've covered this in a previous episode, which is also a snakebite case. And it's essentially where the bride gives a gift to the husband's family in order for his hand in marriage. It's kind of like very opposite. It's kind of like a really outdated tradition, but it still happens in a lot of places, not just in India and also a lot of other cultures apparently. But yeah, because she filed this complaint, Ganesh knew that he could no longer squeeze any money out of her. So he was super unsatisfied, and so he started picking and finding other reasons to quarrel with her. And the biggest reason that he could find, and the one that he stuck with apparently, was that he figured that she was unfaithful to him. So he started accusing her of infidelity, and he started claiming that she's having an affair with another man, and they didn't really name who this man was. I'm not even sure if he even knew who this man was, just an ex-person, right? So in an attempt to save her marriage, and understandably so, she has a baby, and they just got married. She's young, and it doesn't really look good at all in those cultures and those communities in India, especially smaller villages, for a woman to divorce somebody. So even if she was unhappy, she was willing to do what she could, the best she could to, make this marriage work. So she ended up enrolling the couple for marriage counseling. It never ended up working. And then finally, she ended up approaching her family and, really spilling the beans to them, telling them that, hey, this is what's happening. And apparently, led by her father, Kali Patra, the family ended up having an intervention with both her and Ganesh. It seemed like that was very successful, according to reports, and the couple ended up giving it another shot. And it was not long after this family intervention that, of course, this tragedy ended up occurring just months later. So knowing all this and kind of just replaying all these events back in his head, Basanti's father, Kali, ended up filing a police report accusing Ganesh of using the snakes to kill his wife and his daughter. So as police confronted Ganesh, his story was quite inconsistent at this time, because originally he had kind of said that he doesn't know how this happened. He didn't really draw a picture for them as to how this happened. He knew it was a snake bite, but he never really drew a proper picture as like, oh, there was a cobra that came into the house and, I found it in the room after or anything like that. No, he didn't do that initially. But then when he was confronted, he ended up presenting all these specific scenarios of how it could have happened. So they were kind of concerned. It's like, how is he getting so specific all of a sudden when before he was very vague about everything? So that really didn't add up for them, and it kind of grew the police's suspicions as well to believe the father and look into this case and use resources to look into this case even more. So as the police delved deeper into this case, they ended up discovering that Ganesh had not only purchased a new SIM card recently on September 26th, so just a couple weeks before the incident, or just a week before the incident or so, he also ended up putting that SIM card under his father's name, under Ganesh's father's name. So why would you do that? Why would you purchase a SIM card, first of all, just days before this when you already have your own phone? And, this happens just days after. Just didn't really make any sense. It was very suspect for the police. And so the seemingly minor detail, it ended up opening up this whole new avenue for investigation. They really, really got suspicious at this point. And they ended up thinking that this guy definitely premeditated this murder. And this guy seems much more sinister than how he's appearing, as this like grieving husband and father. So the police began questioning locals at this point, and they ended up getting directed to some snake charmers. So then they started questioning all these snake charmers, all these local snake charmers, until they reached one man, finally, who admitted that he'd sold a snake, a cobra more specifically, to Ganesh on October 6th, which is the day before the reported death of Basanti and Deba Smita. So it was at this point that the investigation ended up taking a dramatic turn, and it was believed that Ganesh was the one who had released the cobra into the room while his daughter and wife were sleeping, and that's when the bites occurred. So it really went against all his initial claims of that he found them like that, and everything at this point, all the evidence, it seemed to point towards the fact that he had orchestrated this scenario to make these deaths appear as snake bites. So after intense scrutiny and gathering of evidence for over a month, everything piled up against him, and Ganesh really had no defense at this point, and he finally ended up admitting to everything that he did, and he confessed that he had actually been the one who had killed his wife and his 2-year-old daughter. Now, he ended up detailing the entire sequence of events. It's disturbing to hear, but I mean, this is what happened. So in his confession, Ganesh actually detailed exactly how he'd obtained the snake. He said that he'd gotten it from a snake charmer named Basanta Acharya, who was a local snake charmer once again. He obtained the snake not long before he'd planned on using them to kill his wife, but he'd obtained it under the guise of him wanting to do a special ritual or religious ceremony at a Shiva temple or perhaps at home. A couple of different articles said two different things, so I'm not sure which one of those it was. But regardless, he said he wanted it for a religious ceremony. Now, once he'd requested for it, I'm pretty sure he paid him for the snake. He took the plastic jar which the snake was contained in, he hid it at home, and then on October 6th, that night, once it hit 2 a.m., so October 7th technically, he released the snake into the middle room of the house. That's where he'd had his wife and his daughter sleeping, and he'd been sleeping in the front room. So he just released it in there, closed the door, and that was that. Eventually, the snake ended up biting both of them. Both of them got bitten around the ankle areas. And the really curious part as well was that no screams were heard. And this really reminds me of a previous case that happened with a woman named Uthra, where her husband Suraj, this happened in Kerala, he actually sedated his wife. She was actually mentally disabled, the poor woman. He sedated her, and then he got multiple snakes to bite her. He tried twice to get her killed. Once was with a Russell viper, and once was with a cobra, and Indian monocle or spectacle cobra rather. And it was devastating, just that case itself. But here you have a 2-year-old who was killed as well. And the fact that both of them never let out any screams, this happened in a small village. So if they did scream, and if there was a big scene, then probably multiple people would have heard, and maybe they would have been able to get the mother and daughter, Basanti and Deba Smita, to the hospital on time, and maybe their lives would have been saved. But no screams were heard. So this led officials and authorities who'd read this part of the confession and even analyzed or investigated this case to believe that perhaps Ganesh went and sedated his 2-year-old daughter and his 23-year-old wife Basanti so that they wouldn't wake up to the pain, which is definitely severe when it comes to cobra envenomations. And cobras, they're no joke. You can die within hours, within the hour of being stung. Anaphylactic shock is a possibility. It's very severe, the kind of symptoms that can occur, and death can happen within minutes to hours of a bite, especially if left untreated. So once again, it's extremely tragic how this case happened. Rest in peace to Basanti and her daughter Deba Smita. And I really think that Basanti was likely a good woman really trying to save her marriage. Unfortunately, this man Ganesh, he did not see it that way. And now he's paying the punishment with his life. Hopefully he's been served or sentenced to life. I'm not able to find his sentence, but what I did do was gather information on the sentence that happened with Suraj, the other case I was telling you about, which happened in Kerala. But he was sentenced to 17 years of rigorous imprisonment, as well as double life sentences to be served concurrently. And also he was fined 5.85 lakh rupees, which is like 585,000 rupees. But yeah, once again, I'm pretty sure a similar sentence was handed out to Ganesh, but I couldn't find any information on what the exact sentence was for him. But I really hope that this guy pays with rigorous imprisonment and hopefully even a larger fine and triple life sentences. I don't know, the worst that they can think of. In my opinion, this guy deserves a death penalty. But anyways, if you do want to check out the story of Uthra, I will leave it for you at the end screen of this video. This was a tragic case, and I just wanted to share it with you. Do hit that like and subscribe button if you're new. My name is Animal Al. I'll see you on the next one.